I'm excited to tell you a little bit about the people who are here on the stage. I'm going to introduce Sarah, and it's great to see some friends on the stage. So this panel will be about psychedelic harm reduction, creating the container. And it'll be moderated by Sarah Gale. Sarah Gale is the director of the Zendo Project, working with MAPS since 2012, coordinating psychedelic harm reduction services at festivals and events worldwide. Sarah holds a master's degree in transpersonal counseling psychology at Naropa University and was an intern therapist for the recently completed MAPS Phase 2 clinical trial of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD. She maintains a private practice as a psychotherapist, specializing in trauma and non-ordinary states of consciousness. Please join me in welcoming this panel.
Thanks, Ashley. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. This is a really exciting panel we've got lined up. Thank you all, the panelists, for being here today. So what is psychedelic harm reduction? It's a set of principles and practices aimed at reducing the risks associated with the use of psychedelic substances. The conversation on psychedelic harm reduction includes a conversation on education, drug testing, and support services, both the theory and the philosophy, as well as the practices and the protocol. MAPS has been initiating harm reduction efforts for the past 20 years. Many MAPS staff and volunteers have contributed to a growing body of harm reduction knowledge and best practices. The Zendo Project, started in 2012, is a community outreach program which provides peer counseling to those who are having difficult psychedelic experiences, and is comprised of mostly a volunteer team of psychiatrists, therapists, psychologists, and holistic healers and other health practitioners. And it was started in 2012 at Burning Man. And since then, we have traveled all over the world providing harm reduction services at events like Lightning in a Bottle in California, Envision Festival in Costa Rica, Africa Burn in South Africa, and other small events such as Bicycle Day here in San Francisco. Who here went to Bicycle Day? Yeah. So Zendo Project has partnered with pretty much, every single person and organization that is represented here today. Drug Policy Alliance, RGX, DanceSafe, and Cosmicare, to support the implementation of harm reduction services and education around the world. So I'm going to introduce each one of the panelists, and then each of them is going to talk a little bit about the work that they do in harm reduction. Stephanie Jones works at Drug Policy Alliance and directs the Safer Partying campaign. Richard Gottlieb is a registered nurse, an MBA, and founder and director of RGX Medical. Catherine McLean is the director of the Psychedelic Education and Continuing Care Program in New York and has worked extensively as a research scientist on groundbreaking studies of meditation and psychedelics. Mitchell Gomez is the executive director of DanceSafe. And Maria Carmo Cavallo is the Cosmicare manager at Boom Festival in Portugal and is a lecturer at the Faculty of Education and Psychology at the Catholic University of Portugal. So we're going to start by each one of the panelists are just going to give a brief description of the work that they do as it relates to the field of psychedelic harm reduction and psychedelic support services. So we'll start with you, Maria.
Thank you, Sarah, for your presentation. So I've been involved with Cosmicare first time in 2008, and since 2010, I've been directly involved in the management of the project. And since then, my concern has been not only to ensure the best possible service at that particular event, but also to do what we can to transform Cosmicare into an evidence-based model. So our efforts have been to do as much research about our work as possible, and we have been doing that thanks to the support we've been having not only from Boom, to which we are naturally related to, but also with the support of the Portuguese government and the university that I come from. So I believe that is my most relevant contribution to this field. Thank you.
Thanks, Bree.
Yeah, my name is Mitchell Gomez, and as you said, with DanceSafe. So DanceSafe is a public health education nonprofit. We go out to events, we give out free water, free condoms, free earplugs, free water, and the thing we're sort of most controversially known for doing is on-site reagent drug checking. So at events where we can either get permission or forgiveness to do so, people can people can bring their pills, powders, blotters, whatever to the booth, and we'll actually chemically analyze them to see what the primary composition of those substances is. Black markets are heavily adulterated markets. It's the nature of prohibition, and I'm often very, very jealous of those who get to work in Portugal with some sort of government approval. So.
Hi there, my name's Catherine. After leaving my job at Johns Hopkins, I went through a period of some major disintegration and trying to figure out how to make sense of some of the major transitions I was going through. And the psychedelic program in New York was kind of birthed out of my own need for sharing what I had learned and helping to create community in New York City and a series of both education and integration services that people could use regularly as they were living their lives and taking psychedelics or having other experiences. And so I direct the program. Luckily, I don't have to live in Manhattan all the time. I actually live on a farm, and I only go into the city about once a week. But we have a great team of therapists there working full-time with people using a variety of substances. The whole model is based in harm reduction, and I direct specifically the psychedelic part of that. So it's really fun.
Hi, my name is Richard Gottlieb, and I run RGX Medical, and we provide comprehensive medical and mental health services to over 30 events a year in 3 countries. And the nature of our services is that it is aligned with the principles of harm reduction throughout the entire program. And I have the privilege of working with some really amazing harm reduction organizations as well, which make my job much easier.
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I run the Safer Partying campaign for the Drug Policy Alliance, and there's really 3 things that campaign does. The first is to try and promote drug education and harm reduction services to festival producers and other people. So telling them about organizations like DanceSafe and Zendo Project and convincing them to have them on board at their event. The second thing is really about communication. So once a festival does have harm reduction, how do they talk about it to their attendees? Are they sending social media messages out? Are they going to put a press release out? Do they have the language that they need to really communicate about what they're doing in the right way? And then the third thing is to advocate for policy change that will allow more of these services to happen more frequently across the board.
Thank you. So today we're going to go into a discussion on harm reduction services, what they look like in practice, and talk a little bit about the principles that we use in harm reduction, and go into some of the societal and political aspects that affect and come into this work. So I'd like to start with a question for you, Richard. What do you see as the impact of having harm reduction services that you have worked with, such as Zendo Project and DanceSafe, at the events that you've attended? What do you see has been the impact, and what are the issues that arise when these services are not available?
So at an event where we have the Zendo Project or DanceSafe there is a significantly reduced patient load. I attribute that primarily to education of participants, as well as the fact that we are able to collaborate in real time with these organizations, working together. A lot of people who would otherwise end up in medical and are not necessarily medical emergency are dealt with in a kind and loving and caring way that doesn't necessarily put them into a medical system that they don't need to be in. Especially something like DanceSafe provides something of an emergency alert system. We've had a number of events where there have been some fairly dangerous things going around, like alpha PVP, things that have some cardiotoxicity and things that can have really negative impacts on people. And when those things start showing up in testing results and they come over to me and say, hey, just want to let you know we're starting to see this, we are prepared for that stuff, and that helps us do our job more efficiently. When we do not have things like the Zendo Project and DanceSafe there's a tremendous increase in patient load, first of all. And a lot of that is mental health support. And while we are very happy to be providing that, maybe that's double the patients at times, That will decrease response times to calls because we've got 2 or 3 calls that might have been handled very easily by a Zendo volunteer or prevented in the first place by DanceSafe, and those things are taking place of that one call that could be that moments make a difference, life or death call. So we're trying to hit all of them as quickly as possible. Having more bandwidth to do that makes our job much easier. And in addition, there's a staff burnout. There's really amazing doctors, nurses, paramedics, EMTs, psychologists, psychiatrists that we work with, and being able to share that responsibility with these organizations helps out tremendously. When there is not DanceSafe there, when there is not the Zendo project there, in my experience, and that's several hundred festivals at this point, that results in an increase in hospitalizations and an increase in unnecessary arrests. And these organizations help prevent that in a way which is very effective.
Thank you, Richard. So I'm going to move into DanceSafe. And so, Mitchell, I have a question for you. In the work that you've done over the past decade, really, you've been working with DanceSafe for a long time, what specific challenges do you face in trying to implement education and drug testing at events? And yeah, that's the first part of the question.
So in the United States, there's a piece of legislation that is sort of popularly known as the RAVE Act. It was actually passed under a different name, the U.S. Anti-Drug Proliferation Act. Joe Biden loves clever acronyms, so that originally was Reducing Americans' Vulnerability to Ecstasy, the RAVE Act. And so this basically was an expansion of the crack house laws in philosophy, the idea that if you're providing a premise that the primary purpose is drug consumption, that you can be held liable for the drug consumption that occurs at that event. And from a social justice point of view, if you're going to apply that to minorities who own lower income housing, maybe it does make sense to expand it to rave promoters who are throwing mega raves, right? We should get away with both of them, but from a social justice point of view, it does make sense intellectually, even if it's a very, very dangerous piece of legislation. And they didn't really define in the laws what promote means. There was originally, under the RAVE Act, there was actually some very specific things, including how many beats per minute the music was, and I'm not kidding, do you have glow sticks, are there glowing lights? And I mean, it was very clearly an attack on the community, not on the drug use, right? I mean, beats per minute has very little to do with what molecules people are consuming. And so because this is such a poorly written, poorly defined piece of legislation, promoters are extremely, extremely hesitant, especially promoters with assets, right? People who run these, multi-million-dollar entertainment companies are hesitant to do anything that might be seen as promoting drug use, including providing education, providing services like Zendo, providing anything that acknowledges drug use. They're concerned will be looked at as if they are promoting drug use. The flip side of this is that there has not been a RAVE Act prosecution. This law was passed many, many years ago. 14, 15 years ago now. Is that right? Yeah, 14 years ago, something like that. In that time, we have not had a single RAVE Act arrest or a RAVE Act prosecution. This is a theoretical risk. It's real. I feel for promoters who I often sort of semi-publicly put between a rock and a hard place by calling them out on their refusal to take seriously harm reduction, and then their legal team on the other side saying, look, this has never happened. Do you really want to be the test case? And I feel for them, I do. But at the same time, we have to sort of balance these things. We have to acknowledge that even in prison, drug use is occurring. Prison is as far as you can take a security apparatus, right? I mean, you cannot go any further than prison. That's it. And if drug use is occurring even in prison, then it's kind of ludicrous, in my opinion, to expect promoters to be able to stop drug use at their events. Right? Nobody's squatting and coughing to get into a festival. And so, that's just sort of what it is. And so, DanceSafe does what we can to provide these educational services, and we're happy to work with promoters if there's anything within our, within our proposal. I send a standard proposal. The standard proposal includes providing drug checking kits for people to get in exchange for a donation, and it includes on-site testing where people can bring their pills and powders. It includes an early alert system where we can photograph samples, and then if there's something that's particularly problematic like alpha PVP or 25-IN bomb, which is a drug that gets sold as acid and for some reason sometimes kills people. We don't really know why. not I took a psychedelic and ran into traffic. They're organs. It's multiple systemic organ failure deaths. It's a pharmacological drug deaths from a drug being sold as acid. And so when we see these things, we can make posters and we'll post them up all around the festival and we'll do all these things. And when promoters come back, it says in the proposal, I'm happy to modify any of these services to meet your needs. And if we can't do testing, we don't do testing. And if we can't have test kits on site, we don't have test kits on site. And we're happy to be there just providing education, but even the educational component often gets pushback. I mean, even when we're willing to do that, often promoters tell us, I can't do this, I can't be seen as promoting drug use. And so that's sort of the crux of our challenge, is navigating a world where there's a extremely unlikely event which could happen, this Rave Act prosecution, that the legal consequences of it happening are so severe that a lot of times they're just afraid to work with us, and that's sort of the universe that we operate in.
Thanks, Mitchell. This question's for Stephanie. So with what Mitchell was just speaking about in terms of the Rave Act and the legislation that's currently in place, what can the public do? So the public, and including attendees, festival attendees, as well as festival producers, and as well as service providers, what can we do with the current policies to help support policy on the policy level, to help support harm reduction initiatives? Whether that's what shifts in policy, or what can we do given the current framework that we have?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I mean, Mitchell summed it up really well with the Rave Act. I think a lot of people in the community might be familiar with that. There is a campaign to amend the Rave Act, run by a very courageous mother whose daughter actually died as a result of using MDMA. So that's definitely one thing that I hope everybody out in the audience checks out. Just go to amendtheraveract.org, sign her petition, and just add your voice as support for that. I suppose if you've been paying attention to the political scene right now, it's not really especially encouraging on the federal level, and I'll just leave it right there with that. But as a counter argument to that, what I like to tell people is a lot of times the Rave Act stuff doesn't even apply to the parties that are happening. Parties happen on city property, they happen on county property, they happen on state property. And so it's really powerful when people in particular communities get together and advocate for legislation that will support harm reduction in their area. Like just to have a city, a piece of legislation passed at a city or a county level or even a state level, if you can get that together, that says harm reduction is valid and necessary, and we want to see it happen not just at syringe exchanges, but at festivals and concerts. That is actually really valuable. It gives festival producers the cover that they need to integrate these services on site. So as a person, out there in the world, that's something that you want to ask for and get active around. With festival producers directly, like I do a lot of comforting that they're not going to get in trouble for having these organizations on site. I can point to places where they have been and show them events where they are happening, like at Lightning in a Bottle and Cosmic Care if they want, Boom Festival, which has Cosmic Care if they want an international example. So it's like just talking through those kind of those conversations with festival producers and showing that it has been done before, it can be done again, and they can do it. And here are the groups that can help them do it. And I think, what was the other one that you asked about, festival producers and?
Yeah, what can the public and festival producers, what can we do as a community to, I think you addressed it.
All right,
but, yeah.
So it's we all know each other pretty much on this panel, and so one of the other things that we do that's really powerful is we all represent different aspects of doing this work, and we have our own conversations, and we support each other. Like I support Zendo and Dance Safe, and it's a mutual thing, and we all recognize the need to have each of these entities playing its different role, like having a medical service that supports harm reduction, having the on-site peer counseling and drug education through these organizations, and having integration after the fact, and for all of us, not just one organization talking about those things, but for each of us to raise up the need and the organizations doing the work on all those levels.
Thanks, Steph. So piggybacking off of that, Maria, one mic. So drugs were in Portugal decriminalized for personal use in 2001. So since then, how has that impacted harm reduction services and policies and the implementation of harm reduction? So what specific challenges to implementation are you still facing today, even in a post-prohibition society?
Thank you. Well, maybe very, very briefly tell you something about how the decriminalization law started in Portugal. It actually was a very fortunate event that by the end of the 90s, our government asked an expert commission made of experts from several social areas involved directly in the social problems caused by drug use. And these experts, they made a series of recommendations that included that Portugal should adopt not only the decriminalization model, that the use of any drug should not be a crime, and also that harm reduction should be as important in the country's drug strategy as treatment, as rehabilitation, as prevention. So very fortunately, this was in fact adopted by the government at the time. And in 2000, we had the decriminalization law approved. And in 2001, we had a decree law associated to this law that regulated harm reduction services. So from a long time now, there is no social risk for health practitioners to be involved in providing services such as needle exchange programs, methadone maintenance, and eventually also aid in party settings. So, of course, there is a direct impact towards the dissemination of harm reduction that comes from decriminalization law. This dissemination, however, has been much more widely spread among problematic drug use than has been up to now among party contexts where psychedelics and other substances are likely to be used. So this is our biggest challenge now. What is the reason for this? Because even our scenario in terms of problematic drug use has modified tremendously over these years. Harm reduction projects in urban deprived areas for problematic users have faced an enormous decrease in intravenous drug use, for example. But, however, methadone maintenance programs are getting almost every money that's available for harm reduction in our country. So there is a huge gap that we face nowadays between what are the real needs that most substance users and psychedelic users or whatever substance users are faced with and how the money is being distributed. There's another important problem that comes from this that has to do with the fact that resources are distributed according to a geographical assessment of where intervention needs are located. And festivals and other party contexts don't have a geographical stable nature. So this makes this kind of diagnosis very difficult, and this makes availability of resources to intervene in these contexts also highly, how should I say, unstable. There are a number of huge benefits, however, that come, for example, for the opportunity of complementing our work with the drug checking services. So we can, the harm reduction law has also regulated the possibility for drug checking services to be distributed at party settings. How we manipulate and how we circulate the substance, that's a kind of a blurry field in the law. But what we have, for example, at Boom is that we have a partnership with the government, and the government authorizes the services to be provided at Boom. And if this is protocolized, then we will have absolutely no problem in in using the services, so people feel safe doing it. There is no law enforcement inside the premises, and people feel really safe to use the services. So we get around 20,000 how should I say, people attending the info stand, and some hundreds of drug checking requests that can go around, I believe, 500, 600 requests. So this, of course, is a strategy that has a lot of potential. We do thin layer chromatography, which is, I'm not a chemist, not a biologist, not a pharmacologist, but this is a procedure that allows not only the identification of the substances that are present in the product, but also the adulterants, which makes the information very highly reliable. And this, of course, is part of the number of other strategies that also include the services that we provide at the crisis, psychological crisis intervention that we do at Cosmic Care.
Thanks, Maria. So for Catherine, so we're really talking a lot today about this field of harm reduction where at events people are taking a substance and then for whatever reason they're coming up against a difficult, challenging situation. One aspect of psychedelic harm reduction, which is direct service work, where we do psychedelic peer counseling with people who are in need of emotional or psychological assistance. So you have been involved in research and psychedelic research, and my experience of harm reduction is it's like this, we get to explore this dark side of the psychedelics. We get to talk and come here about the research and the benefits and the healing potential and the therapeutic potential of certain substances. But at festivals, we get to see what happens when people are not coming with the right intention or an intention at all, or working with different setting that's different from a ceremonial or a therapeutic context. So often at the events, but also after, when people go back home to their communities, we don't see that we have services set up to support people in the reintegration of their experience. And I know that for Zendo Project, that's one of our big things that we come up against is after the person has had their experience and then they go back out, we're looking for different resources in the community to connect them with. So how do you see as some of the post-psychedelic experience integration needs that our society has and currently faces, and how can we best to meet those needs, in your opinion?
So on the one hand, I feel like I represent like the most sober, boring version of psychedelic and drug harm reduction up here, which is fine. I also feel very fortunate that I've actually gotten to see a lot of the different situations and settings that everyone is talking about up here, including, in addition, the harm reduction and integration that took place in the research studies themselves, which it doesn't get a lot of attention. Every one of us who's been a session guide or a therapist, we've seen lots of potential tragedies almost occur, and not occur because of amazing research teams, amazing medical backup, amazing trained therapists and guides, and really excellent integration. And so most of what I do as the director of the psychedelic program is I've taken everything I've learned from the research setting and what I've learned in the Zendo project, both at Burning Man and Africa Burn, and I just kind of took it to the streets in New York. And I said, well, there are people using psychedelics right now. I don't know if you guys know that. Did you know that? All the time, actually. I mean, 20% of Americans have tried a psychedelic at least once, and psilocybin recently overtook LSD for the first time since the 60s as the most popular psychedelic. And so, people aren't actually waiting for the results of the FDA trials. I don't mean to, there's a reason that I left the research field. I felt that it was a very narrow and specific application of something that could be beneficial to lots of people without a change in the law. And so what I brought to New York was a philosophy that we could help people with everything but the drug which is actually a lot. So everything that happens before someone decides to take a psychedelic, everything that happens after someone decides to take a psychedelic, everything in that individual, the community, everything that they can integrate into, a teacher of mine talks about integration at the level of nature, at the level of your ancestors, your lineage, your own consciousness. So all of these opportunities for growth and benefit already exist. And then the only thing that we can't do is give people the drugs and sit with them while they're actually having the experience. So on the one hand, that's a huge loss in potential benefit. And I guess one of the things I want to talk about that I see a lot in New York City is people are getting really not such high quality underground services. And that's a bummer. You know, I think there are a lot of us who have really good intentions, and I think there are great underground therapists. There are probably great shamans, and unfortunately there also isn't really high quality, you know, there's not quality control, and people aren't getting a lot of feedback. They're doing really risky work, and they're taking care of a lot of people, and so they can't really do the best job with integration. And so what we're trying to do is we're saying, we understand that that's not the work you want to do. You're getting paid to do this really risky thing, or people are, you know, finding the drugs themselves and taking them with friends. And so we'll do all of the really tedious work afterward and help people kind of put their lives back together based on what came up in the psychedelic experience. So to give a couple examples of what the program actually does, we have actually now a space as part of a therapy center right near Grand Central. The Center for Optimal Living has existed for about 5 or 6 years under the direction of Andrew Tatarsky and Jen Talley. And they're both clinical PhDs. They work with, it's called integrative harm reduction psychotherapy. And they work with psychedelic users, but primarily other substances that are causing some major disruption for people. And the approach is a harm reduction approach, person-centered, compassionate approach where you don't require abstinence, you don't require any change in behavior to start therapy, and you kind of help people meet their own needs and determine why they're in therapy, what they want to get out of it. And then the psychedelic program was kind of added. So within this center, we have individual therapy offices where people can do one-on-one therapy with psychedelic use being the kind of the substance that brings them in. But we also have a group space where we do monthly integration groups that I lead. And we have some people who come really regularly, and that's like their check-in every month where they can go and live their lives and explore and do whatever they're doing. And then they can come in and in a group share about their experience and learn from each other. We also are in our second year now in existence. We are offering workshops like yoga and meditation and sound healing, and we're trying to not go for the like new age kitchen sink. we're trying to, there are places in New York that do that, which is great, but we're trying to select the evidence-based non-drug options for people that help either mimic or complement or actually counteract some of the side effects of being in a psychedelic space. So we're working with those workshops. They're about 3-hour workshops. We try to do one a month. We have guest lectures from the top, you know, NYU, Hopkins, other research groups come and give talks. So from all the way up from the mind down to the body, we're trying to offer regular services so that whatever quality of psychedelic experience people are getting, and whether that's good or bad, they know that there's this existing container in this one place all the time where if in a given month they have a really bad experience, they know where to go. And we want to basically expand into remote care so we can do one-on-one integration support for people and help refer them wherever they are in the country or the world. And we're collaborating with other groups, so we have an all-day workshop tomorrow with Erie that's based here in the Bay Area, and the Temple of the Way of Light. Tanya Mate is the integration director there. Does that mean I have 1 minute? Okay. The last thing I want to say is we also do training for clinicians and for the public on how to be this is kind of my like informal term, is like a good psychedelic Samaritan. So how can you take care of people in your own lives every day? How can you be trained to do that? And it's a little bit different than how you would do it in a festival environment. And so we're trying to come up with models for how to train people to educate and take care of each other right now in this current setting without any change in the law or any new medicines being available.
So as Catherine is speaking about services outside of the festival and event environment, I got curious, Mitchell, about what DanceSafe is doing outside of festival environment in terms of education outreach, so other avenues and other places where DanceSafe is having an impact beyond rave or festival environments.
Yeah, I mean, that's our primary focus for sure. I mean, there's a lot of people doing this work. There's a lot of people doing educational stuff. DPA has been talking about doing some stuff for like even high school educations, and our focus really is the festival community. That being said, I do want to expand within other medical community or other musical communities. Sorry. The problem is that we're peer educators, right? So it's for raves we bring ravers, for burns we bring burners, and so we sort of need to cultivate people who want to get interested in volunteering from other musical communities, because I really, really, really want to avoid sending a bunch of ravers to the Gathering of the Juggalos. Like I really want to avoid doing that in like a super serious way. Like it's funny for sure, but it's a super serious statement. And so it's something we'd like to do, but realistically, our focus really is on musical communities. We do try to partner with people who are doing the work. We try to partner with psychedelics clubs, with SSTP chapters. We try to push our literature out to other partner organizations. We're a staff of 3 doing the job of 12. And so we sort of focus on where our focus is. But if anyone happens to be a secret juggalo out there and wants to grab my card afterwards, I have been told by very knowledgeable people that they could use some harm reduction. So
I would imagine too that just people who are visiting your website and seeing your resources and finding you that way are using that information.
For sure, yeah. And our whole volunteer training is online as well. So I mean, anyone who wants to get trained as a DanceSafe volunteer, you can go on our website, go to the get involved link, volunteer. It'll take you to an online training. If you're in an area that already has a chapter, we'll get you through the training and then funnel you to the chapter. This is new. This is not something that's always been the case. We're trying to standardize our level of training, try to make sure that every one of our volunteers has at least a sort of base level. And if you're in an area that doesn't have a chapter, when we start seeing clusters, I get a nice little map on the back end. And when we start seeing clusters of trained volunteers in an area, we're going to prioritize fundraising and try to launch chapters in those areas. That's a really easy way to get involved. And even if you have no interest in getting involved with DanceSafe, if you just want to learn about the problems of misrepresentation and the problems of adulteration and the problems of difficult experiences and how to identify drugs, and it's a great training to go through. I mean, it's something that I'm really used to being at festivals and having people who are shocked by the fact that there are drugs other than MDMA sold as MDMA. There was a lot of people here that were shocked by that, right? I mean, these are people who are involved in medical research on psychedelics, and they're involved in, academia, and it's, as American citizens, everything we do is incredibly regulated, right? When you go to the store and you buy 3% milk, it's 3% milk. I mean, as a general rule, we're existing within a regulatory framework that assures that there's spot checking on manufacturing, and that all of these things are controlled. And most of us are not going out and trying to buy illegal guns or get hacking equipment on the internet. It's the one black market that a lot of Americans interact with is drugs. That's the one unregulated sphere that people sort of interact with. And if you're used to living in a world where 3% milk is 3% milk, and somebody tells you that this thing is what it is, the fact that that's not necessarily the case, or in some cases statistically unlikely to be the case. I mean, for a long time we saw more substances being sold as ecstasy than MDMA. I mean, it was, there was more things being misrepresented as MDMA than MDMA in the market. For a long time, that's gotten a little bit better over the last few years. There's a few new precursors that some European chemists have worked out and kindly put the recipes on the internet. They were horrified by the flood of substituted cathinones being sold by MDMA, and they worked out some new recipes and published them. And so we're starting to see that change a little bit now. But this is the one sphere, and so people don't know that, right? I mean, maybe an academic or a medical researcher has read the research on MDMA and goes and gets some MDMA, and it's a problem that they don't know that these things can be adulterated or misrepresented. And so I mean, we try to do that. We try to push that education. I'd love a billboard if you know any funders who what's in your bag. Put a nice big billboard, and I think in Nevada is where I'd throw that up. But it's a way that you can get involved if you want to go online and get trained, and we'll teach you all sorts of interesting things about drugs. I mean, it's tough on a panel. I throw out little nuggets, but there's a lot of information out there and a lot of really, really scary things. One thing I want to say is that we live in a world now, I try to teach people this, we live in a world now where any one of you could draw on paper a psychedelic drug, right? So draw LSD or mescaline or psilocybin or MDMA and knock off a hydrogen here and add an oxygen and maybe, throw a 1p ring over here and maybe a nitrogen over here. And it's close, right? It's got the indole ring. If you eat it, it'll probably get you high. I mean, it's close enough to that, right? But it doesn't have a name. It's new. It's never existed anywhere in the world. And there's labs in China that you can just send them a picture and they'll deliver a gram in, 14, 28 days, however long it takes them to work out a synthesis. It doesn't take a chemistry degree. It doesn't take anything other than a credit card and the willingness to do a little research on the internet. And, you can be a space monkey. I mean, you can be the first bipedal primate in the history of mankind to eat a brand new drug. I mean, it's like not, it's a thing that you can do. And if somebody chooses to do that, I have no judgment on that. If somebody chooses to develop a new drug on paper and send it to a lab in China and try it, I don't tell other people how to consume drugs. But the problem is that when these things get laid on blotter and they go to a festival and they call it acid and they start selling it, and we have no idea what dosage, safety profile, duration, medical effects, cross tolerance with other drugs, interactions with other drugs. I mean, some medics, not so much RJX, but some medics, they'll chemically sedate anyone having a bad trip, which with LSD, maybe it's not such a big problem, right? I mean, psychologically, a huge issue. Pharmacologically, maybe it's not such a problem. But with, again, like I said, a drug that has no name, it's just impossible to know what's going to happen when you try to chemically sedate someone. I mean, there's just no way to know. Or if you're on SSRIs or ate some grapefruit juice, which increases bioavailability of some of these drugs. And so it's a much different drug consumption world than it was just 10 years ago, just 5 years ago even. And so, yeah, worth knowing.
Yeah. Richard, I have a question for you around, in your experience working with other medical service providers and other emergency service providers at festivals, who are maybe interested or not interested in partnering with harm reduction services. How would you advise or, what's the other word? How would you advise or set up the conditions where other emergency service providers would be open to working in collaboration with harm reduction services like DanceSafe, Zendo, CosmicCare at events?
So as a medical services provider, the first thing you need to do is understand that everything you're going to run into at a festival or an event is pretty much everything that's going to happen in real life. There's drug-related stuff, there's cardiac, there's trauma, there's respiratory. You're going to run into everything, but you're also going to be, as the medical provider, dealing with mental health. You're going to be dealing with pediatrics. You're going to be dealing with sexual assault, domestic violence, drug addiction. That's all part of the little first aid booth at the festival you went to. So the first thing you do is you need to create a comprehensive multidisciplinary team and have those people around and have that knowledge institutionalized within your organization. And having something like the Zendo Project there, or DanceSafe, gives you a lot of those tools and gives you access to those resources in a way that you may not be able to if you don't have the resources to have that type of a team at an event. And then you need to internally, as an organization, create a strong harm reduction training program for all of your medical providers, your field medics, your clinicians, that emphasizes safety. Those are two major components of it. As a medical provider, you have the opportunity to train festival staff, the producers of these events, security guards, bar managers, stage managers. These people oftentimes are the first point of contact, and so having some basic harm reduction training from that medical team and from organizations like these makes a huge difference in patient outcomes. Getting a good security company, someone who has some understanding of harm reduction. High Rock Security is one of them. There's a number of them that take a very different approach to security, where they understand that they are there as an advocate of the participants of the event as well as the producers. And working with outside agencies is a huge part of it. Working with law enforcement, working with fire, county EMS, and other public agencies, developing a strong trust-based relationship with them, where they trust you and they trust your judgment. And then taking that opportunity to provide some harm reduction training for them as well. And when everyone is working together and you have organizations like these that can help you implement that, then everything seems to work out much better.
but we still have about 10 minutes, and we want to leave some time for Q&A. I think that's a really rich part of the panel discussion. So we're going to move into Q&A. Is there another mic nearby here? Maybe we can have people line up right here where Ryan is. Oh, great. Okay.
While everyone's getting ready to ask a question, I want to direct your attention to Ingmar Gorman, who's going to raise his hand. Where are you? Is he not here again? All right. So Ingmar is my clinical counterpart, and he's going to have his doctorate by this summer, and then he's going to take up like the awesome one-on-one therapy side of what we're doing and really run with it. And I think he just recently decided to stay in New York City, which is wonderful. So we get to keep him forever. And he's around. So if you have questions about therapy, I'm not a therapist, so go ask him. He's all the therapy, harm reduction.
I do have a question for you, Catherine.
Oh, okay.
I would love to know what a typical format of your integration circles look like that you host in your center.
Yeah, we'll be doing an all-day workshop tomorrow, but it's unfortunately sold out at 200 people. It's like going to be insane in this room. Don't try to sneak in. It's going to be an insane circus of trying to move people into lots of different small groups. But we're going to work on some video, like webinar tutorials of like how to run integration circles the way we do. Not that there's anything special about it, just that we've been doing it now for about a year and a half. So there's 1 or 2 facilitators. I love it when there's an actual trained therapist with me, like a licensed clinician with me, but it's not necessary. And I think for each person who's facilitating, you just have to be clear about your own ethical boundaries, how much you want to share personally, how much you want to let it be more group discussion versus actually helping people kind of come to resolution more quickly by giving more feedback. I always start with some kind of mindfulness breathing practice at the beginning and the end. We started at 1.5 hours, it's just not enough time, so now we do 2-hour groups of about 25 to 30 people max. Mostly it's like 15 to 20. We have them on the same basically day of the month, time of the month, the 3rd Wednesday of every month, so that people kind of get in this rhythm of knowing where to go every time. It's not just a mindfulness exercise. I actually had people think of a past psychedelic experience, and then through the eyes, ears, body, mouth, nose, recall and actually remember, actively relive the experience so that it's fresh, and then when they share, it's all from that direct experience. Which I think is just naturally healing by keeping people in the body. And also, I talked to some hypnosis people here. I think what I'm accidentally doing is a little bit of hypnosis, so it's like giving someone a sober psychedelic experience, which is kind of cool. And then the tricky piece is referring people to one-on-one therapy. A lot of people aren't ready to make that commitment, or they think that one-on-one therapy means they have a problem. And so it's kind of up to the facilitator, I think, ethically. If someone keeps coming to the group and isn't talking so much about psychedelics, but is talking about lots of other issues that are much more suited to psychotherapy, I think it's up to the facilitator to say, hey, you can keep coming, this is great, but this isn't group therapy, and I can't solve your trauma issues that keep coming up. This isn't the right place to explore this really intense anxiety, like that only is kind of related to psychedelic use. So that's kind of the job of the facilitator. And then, but there are different models, and so tomorrow we're exploring these different models that the different groups have come up with. So that's just kind of how I'm doing it. But
Beautiful. Thank you all for the work that you do. I really, really appreciate it.
Just one brief suggestion to start off. I would love to see on this sort of panel next year someone from Students for Sensible Drug Policy. They do some of the best education that I've seen and some of the best harm reduction work. And thank you, Catherine, for doing not only harm reduction, but benefit maximization as well. That's so useful, and I think it's highly necessary. So a quick question. Based on my experience working for organisations in Australia, I found the most useful thing for policy change that we've done is just focus on a single issue and get some of the major political leaders to try and take that up. So we do maybe pill testing at festivals, or we've got needle exchange programs, or putting in a safe injection facility. So I'm wondering, is that something that you try to do, or what's your opinion of that as a strategy to get change happening?
Stephanie?
If there was going to be a single issue campaign, it would be around pill testing or drug checking, because that's what everybody, well, I won't say everybody, but many people in the festival community sort of cotton on to that. It's complicated because there's different laws in every state. Like in some states it's sort of allowed, but mostly it's not. So it's definitely a good idea, and I watch all the time about what Australia is doing. You guys are having a lot of really good conversations and debates, and I think it's a good model that we'll probably eventually explore in the US.
Thanks.
I'm curious what strategy that we as the psychedelic community can adopt to encourage a more robust acceptance of harm reduction at not only festivals, but when we talk about underground therapy, whether it's a rating system, just some sort of actionable step, whether it be social media, to kind of have that impact on festivals that consistently refuse to provide harm reduction, even though they know that drugs are fueling their economy.
I'll just, that does deserve clapping. I will just jump in on the social media thing and say that, I mean, I haven't explored Instagram yet, but Twitter hashtags are great for events, and that's a way if an event is not yet working with you, you can get some harm reduction and some education in there, which is just use their own hashtag and tweet that stuff out, and so it becomes part of the conversation whether or not they approved it. So that's one sort of like underground strategy. I want to see if other people.
Well, I can share a little bit about the example of how it's been with Boom Festival producers. So Cosmic Air is Boom Festival, so I'm pretty much engaged in that position. And so this has never been an issue. So it was a responsibility assumed by Boom producers to take care of the situations that occur. And this has actually became a part of a communication strategy that highlights the festival's attitude towards the protection of the interests and the safety of their partygoers. And so it's not so much, of course we get a lot of negative media attention, but it's the fact that we exist and the fact that such a number and diverse number of strategies are being implemented, there are the responsibility of the festival. This makes it, of course, much easier to have good publicity happening and to be in the news for a good reason. Thank you.
We only have a couple minutes left, so maybe there's time for one more quick question.
Hello, I'm member of Energy Control in Spain, and well, there we are lucky enough to be able to provide as well harm reduction services as well as check-in services. This summer I was lucky enough to work with Maria at Boom Festival in both facilities, drug checking and Cosmic Care. And I've been traveling around Europe, having some festivals as well. And for me it's striking to find such a difference in the legality of, let's say, of harm reduction between Europe and United States. So my question goes, how far do you see this amendment or this change in the RAVE Act? Do you think that is gaining enough momentum to be able to be possible in the next 5 years, 10 years, or do you think that it will require much more time? Thank you.
So first, thanks for your incredibly useful colorimetric database that you guys built with Adam. I super appreciate it. So thank you for that. So I think we're in for a rough couple years, right? I think that it's a tough environment in the United States right now to try to push for more liberal drug policy. I also think that was very likely to be true regardless of who won the election. I mean, not that Hillary is Bill by any means, but the Clinton, Bill did oversee the largest increase in our prison population in U.S. history. He's a tough on crime, and so is Hillary. I mean, we were in for a rough 4 years no matter what. I do think that the conversation around harm reduction is a global conversation. It's a conversation that's moving very, very quickly. I mean, the Australians have been getting major media all the time. You guys are doing great work. DanceSafe has been in, the Rolling Stone did an article on us last year that was, meet the people making it safer to take drugs at music festivals. It was, it's amazing, right? We're having the idea that we would be in Rolling Stone is amazing. So it's a global conversation, and it's one that I think that is moving very quickly. And we might get to the point where maybe amending the Rave Act isn't what happens. Maybe someone goes to jail providing harm reduction services. Maybe somebody dies at a festival who is politically connected and their family is connected, and that moves the conversation forward. Maybe we amend the Rave Act. The one thing about the Trump administration is there are voices within that administration that are incredibly libertarian and say that we should let people make their own decisions about their lives. And so if we can sort of leverage that, and the nice thing about pendulums is that they swing, right? I mean, that's the nice thing. And so we're sort of, we're over here right now, but pendulums swing, and I'm real good at I'm real good at judo, and we can flip things, and we can take energy and momentum, and we can move it in directions that the person who provided the momentum maybe wasn't intending you to. But that's a skill, and it's a skill that psychedelics actually are uniquely train us to do, to move energies in a way that maybe you weren't expecting. And so I do think that we are going to see a change about the legality of pill testing and other harm reduction services. I mean, it's my jam, but it's one small component of the harm reduction universe, and it's an important part, but it's a part that I do think we are going to see more legality around, and until we see more legality around it, Dance Safe is here, and we're willing to do what we do, and we're not going to stop. I mean, I'm not going to stop doing what we do, and so there's that as well. So.
All right, thank you so much for coming. Thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today, and thank you for being here. Yep.